I am somewhat skeptical that this kind of individual strikes will suffice to create the kind of deterrent effects that we are hoping. We could have prepared various options about how we withdraw from the Indus Water Treaty. We could have, right now it's just a paper statement. If the Pakistani military is not able to defend Punjab, then it will show up within the domestic context the Pakistani army as weak and incapable. Clearly, the U.S. is no longer that interested. The U.S. Under the Trump administration, they are not particularly keen on getting involved. We should have been, I think, better prepared for this narrative war.
On Wednesday, India launched missile strikes in retaliation against the Pahalgam terror attack. Codenamed Operation Sindoor, India struck 9 terrorist locations inside Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. In the midst of raging military tensions between India and Pakistan, we are joined by Dr. Rajesh Rajagopalan, Professor of International Relations at JNU. Hi, Dr. Rajagopalan.
Hi, thank you for having me.
First question, India did Operation Sindoor a day back. What deterrence effect do you think this will have with respect to Pakistan-sponsored terror?
Yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see because obviously we have done a couple of times these kinds of operations. We did one surgical strike in 2016, then in 2019 we did the Balakot strike. Clearly, neither of them have had the required effect because Pakistan is back at. Not only has Pakistan not disbanded the terrorist groups that it is sponsoring, it has been engaged in low-level terrorist attacks, and now, of course, a much more serious attack at Pahalgam. So clearly, there hasn't been the kind of deterrent effect that we had hoped in 2019 and 2016. So prior to that, obviously, we had not really done very many attacks. Whatever was done prior to that was done covertly, and they really did not have much public visibility. And so one wouldn't expect this kind of deterrent effect to take place in those kinds of cases. But even the very public operations that we have done both in 2016 and 2019 does not appear to have had the kind of deterrent effect that we hoped those operations would have had. So we had to sort of wait and see what sort of deterrent effect this one will have. This is obviously a somewhat more intense series of attacks, multiple targets, both in POK as well as in Pakistan proper, including in Punjab, Muridke, and so on and so forth. So it's a more serious attack, but I am somewhat skeptical that this kind of individual strikes will suffice to create the kind of deterrent effects that we are hoping that it would have. Partly because we also seem to be very intent on non-escalation, because we made it a point in our statement after the attacks that this was not targeted at Pakistan army. We didn't attack any Pakistani army targets, and that this was only intended to strike at terrorist camps. So there seemed to be inherent within it a kind of anti-escalatory statement, and that's if we are afraid of escalation, then deterrent effect is going to be somewhat less, and that's so I hope I'm wrong, because I hope that this has a kind of deterrent effect that we are clearly hoping it would have, but I suspect that it would not have that kind of effect.
So I think what you're referring to is the Indian press statement just after Operation Sindoor, which said that India is not targeting Pakistani military installations, and hence this is not an escalation.
Exactly.
So do you think this was a strategic mistake, that you can't have deterrence without at least a threat of escalation?
Yeah, I mean, if we are demonstrating that we are afraid of escalation, then that reduces the deterrent effect, because you are telling them that we don't want to fight, essentially. I mean, and this is not just in the Indian case. We see this happen to give you one example, one recent example, we've seen this happen in the Russia-Ukraine case, where Russia's repeated threats of escalation severely constrained Western support for Ukraine, even though when ultimately that support was granted, I mean, whether it was for, initially it was for artillery, then it was for tanks, then it was for planes, each time Russia threatened escalation, and that sort of had a negative consequence on Western support. But when they did provide that support, it turned out that these threats didn't really matter. So we can't really, if we suggest that we are afraid of escalation, then that reduces our deterrent effect of whatever we are trying to do. And so that's a reason why I'm saying that that statement was probably not the right one to make. And we did this the same in 2019 also. We did the same thing. We said something similar, which is to that we don't want escalation, but we also that we said that this was in response to some anticipated terrorist attacks on. It was a preemptive attack on, because they were planning to attack us and so on and so forth. Those kinds of excuses are, I would think, are unnecessary, because we had a casus belli, which is that there was a terrorist attack, which quite likely came from Pakistan, and then there's a history of terrorist attacks that Pakistan has engaged in, and I don't think anybody suspects that Pakistan was not involved in it, and so there is no reason to give these excuses. I mean, we could have said very clearly that that this was a reason for our action, and that if need be, we will continue those actions. I mean, so I think that stating this, saying things like, this is not meant to be escalatory, and that we will not attack Pakistan Army, which after all is a sponsor of this kind of terrorist attack, is somehow dilutes the seriousness of the attacks that we are engaging in.
I just want to unpack what you said about 2019. So you're referring to the Balakot airstrikes. So are you saying that
Yeah.
also did not have much deterrence impact on Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism?
Yeah, because we clearly see that they continued their support for terrorism. They did not disband any of the groups that they were sponsoring. Those groups continue to be maintained and supported within Kashmir and within Pakistan proper, and they have engaged in continued terrorist attacks. I mean, this is the most serious of those terrorist attacks, but even prior to this, there have been more minor terrorist attacks over the last couple of years. And so clearly that has not had the deterrent effect. We can see that did not have the deterrent effect. If it had the deterrent effect, we wouldn't be in this situation today, because we wouldn't have had the Pahalgam attacks. So yeah, I think that the 2019 attack also did not really have the effect that we intended it to have.
So what would work? Do you look at, for example, India withdrawing from the Indus Waters Treaty more positively? You think that will actually have put pressure on Pakistan?
That could put pressure on Pakistan, but again, I think part of the problem is adequate preparation for these kinds of initiatives. So, if we are withdrawing from the Indus Water Treaty, then we could have prepared various options about how we withdraw from the Indus Water Treaty. We could have, right now it's just a paper statement, because we can't really do very much in terms of the waters that we are holding, and we can't really dam it up completely. We can't really deny them water, because what will we do with the water? We haven't really prepared any alternative plans for holding that water or for diverting that water. I mean, those are things that we could have done. I mean, we could have prepared canals, we could have prepared other ways of diverting the waters, and which I'm assuming, that we will start doing that now. But those are the kind of things that could have been done, which would have lent some credence to the threat to stop the Indus Water, or to abrogate the Indus Water Treaty, or suspend the Indus Water Treaty. So, but without those preparations, that seems like more like paper statements, rather that we will not be able to actually follow through, because we have done no preparation for those kinds of actions. But obviously, if we make those preparations, or even now, if we say that we are abrogating the treaty, or if we say that we are suspending the treaty and take action to actually divert those waters, then it might have some effect on Pakistan.
So you're saying rather than knee-jerk measures, India needed to take long-term measures, and that's what will
Yeah,
actually
because
impact
again,
Pakistan.
yeah, exactly. Because these were options that have been talked about for 20 years. It's not like these are new things. I mean, in this water treaty, or even military strikes on Pakistan, these are not new things, right? I mean, these options had been on the table for many years, and so some greater preparation needs to have been done. Some kind of preparation needs to have been done prior to taking these initiatives. And so, because otherwise these initiatives are just words, right? I mean, we are not actually doing anything. Um, we are just saying things that we will do these things. And now maybe, hopefully, those preparations will be there, will be made, but it should have been made earlier.
Okay. I want to go back to your point about India striking Pakistani Punjab. So
Yeah.
that is the heart of Pakistan as well as its military. I wanted to unpack how does Pakistan's internal politics works. Do these strikes produce pressure on the Pakistan army in some way, and how does that pressure then get realized in terms of action?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely better than what we had done in 2019, because I think there was one target that was outside of POK at that time, but attacking a target in the heart of Pakistani Punjab, which is the base and the core of the Pakistan Army, and the core of the Pakistani state, as it were, does have some positive effect. I mean, it will put pressure on them, because if the Pakistani military is not able to defend Punjab, then it will show up within the domestic context, the Pakistani army as weak and incapable, and that would definitely reduce their prestige and power within the Pakistani system. Hopefully, it will have good effects, but it depends again on the seriousness of the attack. It depends on how. I did hear that there were some attacks today also in Lahore and other places, but it depends on how serious those attacks are and what the targets are and things of that kind. I mean, so the primary focus has to be on the Pakistan army. I mean, whether you're attacking in Punjab or in POK, place like that, because the Pakistan army is the one that is directing these attacks, obviously. It is they who are the brains behind the long, many decades old strategy of using terror against India. So it is that brain that one has to target. It is the Pakistan army that you have to signal to. Attacking just terrorist groups is, I mean, it's a start, but it's a rather minimal start, I would think.
Yeah, in fact, it is not only as Pakistan Army supported these groups, but in fact, it draws a lot of power from the fact that it supports these groups, right? Within Pakistan, the fact that
Exactly,
it's,
exactly. Yeah.
as people say about Pakistan, that it's a military with a country rather than a country with a military. I want to
Yep,
zoom out from
exactly.
I want to zoom out from Pakistan and go to the world right now. Dr. Rajagopalan, there's a narrative war that's going on. You mentioned, attacks on Lahore yesterday, which Pakistan has claimed. There is an immense narrative war that's been going on almost for the past 48 hours now. Pakistan is claiming Indian losses, which India has not verified till now. India, in fact, has
Yep.
maintained mum. Do you think India's strategy with respect to the narrative war, especially in the international media, especially in international capitals, is the correct one right now?
Yeah, I mean, again, these are. I'm a bit surprised because we went through the exact same thing in 2019,
Right.
right? We had a long, drawn out discussion about a narrative war, as it were, at that time, about what targets were hit, how serious was the attack, how many planes were shot down, and all of those things. It is kind of a repeat of those sorts of debates. So again, this should not have been a surprise. We should have been, I think, better prepared for this narrative war, because obviously it's not just in India. Again, we can look at the war in Gaza or Ukraine. In all of these cases, there is a war of narration that takes place, and this is not new it's not just the current epoch either. Even prior to that, we've had these. Whenever there's a war, there is always the first casualty is always the truth, obviously, but it's always that there is also a war of narratives going on, and we should have probably been somewhat better prepared to respond to these kinds of, to that particular focus of the international community, especially because now with social media and Twitter and things like that, obviously it's much more intense, minute by minute uh, sort of developments that get played out, and so I think again it's a bit surprising that we were not better prepared for some of these things. So this was anticipatable.
You spoke of social media. We're living in this incredibly complex world where there are a million moving parts. In this sort of scenario, what sort of de-escalation ladder do you see coming up for both India and Pakistan? I don't think neither of the two countries want a full-blown war. In fact, India was very clear that this is not an escalatory strike with respect to Operation Sindoor.
Yeah.
What do you think would lead to a de-escalation with respect to the two countries? What sort of scenarios do you see right now playing out?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the last case again, 2019, I think that's illustrative because it kind of ended quite suddenly because I think neither side was prepared for further escalation because both sides did recognize that further escalation would have created all sorts of uncertainties, and war is always an uncertain business, and so that was whatever they wanted to do, they're done, and they were not prepared to go any further. I think in this particular case today, it does seem that our type of operation, the operations that India has undertaken, has largely come to a conclusion. I don't know for certain, obviously, I don't have any inside information, but if the focus was on the Pakistani terrorist groups, we had launched one series of attacks, and then maybe today there is another series of attacks. So it's entirely up to Pakistan to see whether they want to respond to this or whether they will be satisfied with whatever success they're claiming in terms of shooting down Indian combat aircraft, which 4 or 5 or whatever they're claiming. But as long as they are satisfied with those claims, they can sort of de-escalate without losing face. I mean, at one level, I think
So you're saying
they
in
can
some ways the Pakistani claims of Indian jets being shot down could actually be a de-escalation ramp.
Yeah, it's possible because they could, irrespective of the truth of the matter, they can always claim that they shot something down. And given the nature of social media and whatnot, I mean, it's not like the Pakistani domestic populace will necessarily believe what India says. And so, if they can credibly make those kinds of claims, irrespective of the truth of the matter, that will provide them with an avenue for de-escalation. But on the other hand, if the current Pakistani Army chief also seems to be a little bit more militant than the army chiefs that we've had in the past, and so if you want much more muscular Pakistani response, I mean, last time they did a kind of a silly attack on a base, and which wasn't really much of an attack, but then they used that as a de-escalatory step to climb down, saying that they had attacked. Now, they had also retaliated by attacking Indian Air Force base. So they could, if they want a full-scale retaliation for Indian attacks, then that might be another step on the escalatory ladder. I mean, so it really depends at this stage. I think it largely depends on Pakistan to decide whether they want to keep going up the escalatory ladder or whether they want to de-escalate.
So India's defense minister.
I don't think that if they de-escalate, I don't think India will escalate further.
So India's defense minister has today released a statement saying Operation Sindoor is still ongoing. How do you unpack that?
Yeah, I mean, so there have been some attacks today. So, but that particular statement could simply mean that we are waiting for Pakistan to respond. I mean, so that it could be just that. I mean, we are just waiting for until Pakistan starts reducing its alert status and things of that kind. So as long as Pakistan alert status and so on remain high, one could argue that the after effects of Operation Sindoor continues. I mean, I don't know if that's what he meant, but I'm saying that that could possibly be one potential meaning of what he said. I mean, if there are further attacks tonight, I would expect that those attacks will be of a less serious nature than what happened yesterday night, because obviously you would expect that the most severe attacks would take place at the very beginning rather than subsequently. I'm sure that we have other attack options on the table, but unless that would probably be activated only if there is a further action from the Pakistani side.
I want to again zoom out to the global situation, Dr. Rajagopalan. What we're seeing is a very interesting matrix developing. Yesterday, Mr. Dobal, India's NSA, spoke to the Chinese foreign minister. Today, a Saudi minister has, landed in Delhi and in an unscheduled visit. And in all of this, the US seems to be strangely absent. Are we
Yeah.
seeing a very new world order emerging with respect to how the world is managing India-Pakistan tensions?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the problems that we've had in the past is everybody interfering, in things that we wanted to do, and so that international concern, is, especially because India and Pakistan are nuclear weapon states, that's always been an issue that we have been concerned about, or at least claim that we were concerned about. I think I half suspect that we use international, not just half suspect, but we know that India has used international intervention, diplomatic intervention, as a way of putting pressure on Pakistan. So, it's not like, so that is baked into our overall grand strategy, as it were. The diplomatic aspect of the strategy includes expectation that we will be able to utilize international intervention to put pressure on Pakistan and to sort of de-escalate and so on and so forth. So that might be happening here with Saudis and the Chinese. Clearly, the U.S. is no longer that interested. The U.S. Under the Trump administration, they are not particularly keen on getting involved. He has said that as much, and I don't think we are too keen. I mean, Trump is quite an unruly character, obviously, so it's very difficult to figure out exactly, if we do involve him, that how he might react, and so he adds a level of uncertainty which I don't think the Indian, that we want to have involved in this situation. But the Secretary of State and others are more sedate and more calm and may know better. But they have their hands full right now with two negotiations going on. Actually three. We have the Russia-Ukraine one, which may be winding down. You have the Gaza one, and then you have the Iran nuclear one. So there are three separate sets of negotiations that they are engaged in. So I'm not sure that they have the bandwidth for one more in India to do with India and Pakistan. So that may be one reason why Saudis and the Chinese are getting involved more actively.
Could you is it significant that actually Mr. Dobal spoke to China yesterday?
I am I'm not sure how significant that is, because obviously they are very clearly, very close partners, China and Pakistan. On the other hand, considering that India and China are currently on a slightly more positive trend in their relationship, it is possible that we do want to, that we want to. I don't know whether India is trying to get China involved. I doubt that. But it may just be a question of keeping them abreast of what's happening and justifying Indian actions and things of that kind. I doubt that we are going to get China involved in negotiating with Pakistan. Who know? I mean, I don't know, but I would be somewhat skeptical of that kind of an outcome.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Rajagopalan, and thank you, viewers, for watching. Stay safe.